see if we get anybody else in. There's one person.
Hi, everybody. We have people coming in. We'll give people a few minutes to get settled. And then also know that we are going to share the recording on our YouTube channel as we have been with all of these. We are super excited to have Deb here and James as well to support. Deb is the owner of Welcome to PDX, a longtime sponsor of Rose City Rollers, and our resident home buying expert, has helped a lot of people at Rose City to be successful in navigating the Portland real estate market. And between them, Deb and James are going to give us some real-time information about what the market looks like and how things are going realistically given the present circumstances, and what we think the trend will be upcoming in real estate. So with that, I will hand it over to Deb and James, and I will also let them handle the Q&A. They're going to shout out some questions in real time so that this feels interactive as much as possible on Zoom. And then we will also have a Q&A at the end for any other questions. So feel free to use that Q&A area at the bottom of your screen. And when you hover over it, you'll see that pop up. You're welcome to use that. And I will also be on chat with you guys. So take it away, Deb and James.
Hey guys. This is Deb, and I am happy to see everybody here. We got a ton of people. I'm really excited about that. So this is our starting point while we talk about what we're going to do. I've got both the chat and the Q&A boxes open, so go ahead and type in whatever you want to say or any questions you have there, and we'll go ahead and get those answered as they pop up. I like it to be real interactive, but I know you're all muted and we can't change that. So definitely feel free to text and chat as much as you want to so that I can kind of keep an eye on what's going on. And that said, I'll go ahead and get started. I've been sponsoring Derby for about 2 years now. I've been a realtor since 2006 in Portland. And then I got my license for the Washington side, I think in 2015-ish, something like that. And it's I've never loved a job the way that I love doing this. And so there's something tremendously satisfying about this to me. And I really love it. And I'm happy to be able to share that with Derby and the work that we do. So my specialty has always been first-time home buyers. It's one of the things that I really, really love doing. Thank you, Leanne. And I've always put up a Home Buying 101 on the website. It kind of talks you through, here's exactly the process of buying your home, and so that you can just go back and look at all of these steps. What do you do next and what happens? And my first step, everybody always wants to know, how do I get started on this? My first step has always been and will always be, talk to a lender. Because I can take you out to see houses all day long, but until you know what you qualify for, it's not going to be any fun for you, because we're going to look at things that are too expensive, or we're going to look at things that are not expensive enough. Most importantly, you're going to think, I can't afford to do this, or I don't know what I can do, or I don't think I can. And a good lender, all of my lenders are good lenders, good first-time buyer folks, people who can walk you through the process of, if you're not ready now, here's what it will take you to get ready. So I always want you to start with talking to a lender. So James is going to talk first, and he's going to talk to us about, people's questions are always, I thought I needed a big down payment. Well, here's what you need in the down payment. Closing costs, which is a thing people don't know about, what closing costs are and how much usually they run and how to handle them. And then I'll talk about inspection costs later, because it's part of the, here's what you need out of pocket to get going. So James, I'm going to let you go now.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the great intro. So my name is James Comro. I'm with Two Rivers Mortgage. I started the company in 2017. We're an independent broker, which means we're not tied to any one particular bank or lending institution. So we take your situation, we shop all of our lending sources, and we place the loan where it makes the most financial sense for you. So I've been doing this since 2006, so it's been a long time, and love it, and couldn't imagine doing anything else. And it's the way that I treat my business is when I bought my first house, I didn't know anything and I wasn't really told anything. And so going into it, I don't know how the numbers work. I don't know how anything makes sense. Was it a good deal? Was it a bad deal? I didn't know. I was young. I'm like, I'll just sign here. Let's go. So it worked at the time, but that's not how we do it these days. So what I always tell people is, please don't be afraid, because we're all human, and I'm happy to sit down and talk to you, have a phone conversation. Usually what I do at the beginning is say, let's talk about your income. Let's talk about your debt. Let's talk about your assets and where your comfort level is on your monthly payment. And then we kind of go from there. And it works out really well. And typically, first-time home buyers, you need at least a 3% down payment and 3.5% for FHA. So it's not a whole lot of money. And then you'll need some money for closing costs, which is typically about $4,000 roughly, plus a year of taxes and a year of homeowners insurance. And there's different ways to pay for that, which we can get into later on. But it's not a lot of upfront cost. And as I always tell people, that I've never met a person that bought a house that went back later and said, man, I loved renting.
So real quick, I'm going to give you guys a second to type in any questions that you might have for James about the process of money or concerns about money. If you've got those questions, see if there's anything coming up in here. And I don't see anything. So one of the things that James had talked about was handling closing costs. And when we get to the negotiation part of this, one of the things that we can do is ask the seller for credits towards your closing costs. So that can drop your funds as well. And that's a very common first-time buyer thing. So really what you need up front in order to start this process is your inspection costs, which are about $1,000, and your earnest money costs as well. Hannah wants to know, is down payment hard cash or part of the loan? Now,
down payment, yes. Cash at closing. It's not part of the loan.
Yeah. The closing costs we can roll into the loan, but the down payments we cannot.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, the only caveat to that would be if you're a veteran, you can do a VA loan with no money down. And there's also a government program that's called USDA that's for rural areas, typically small population areas, so not Portland Metro. It also doesn't require a down payment. But the USDA loan has some, because it's no down payment, it's restricted as to who can get it. So there's some income and property restrictions, but it's also available if you're looking, further out.
And you'd be surprised how close you can get to the city of Portland and still be in the USDA area, because I've done a few of those too. Two things: can a down payment be via credit card? I don't think so.
It cannot. It can be gifted if you have a family member that can gift it, but a credit card is borrowed money, and so it's not eligible as part of the down payment. That's a good question.
Yeah. And then Taylor wants to know, how do temporary or permanent layoffs due to COVID affect financing?
That's a really good question right now. The lender typically, in the old days, would always do one employment verification right at the very end of the process. Now we do a couple along the way. So if your employment is affected by COVID, so you're either furloughed or you took a pay cut. If you took a pay cut, well, you might be okay. If you're furloughed, we need to wait until you're back getting your regular hours again, because from an underwriting standpoint, we just don't know how long that furlough is going to last.
So if you had something from the employer that said we're going to furlough for a month and then bring them back, would that be helpful? Or
you would need to be back on the job at your regular hours.
Okay.
Right, because they can always change the furlough. They can say it's a month for now, and then a month later, they could extend it even further. So I had a client that lost their job 2 days before closing in early March because of COVID. And they were supposed to be getting furloughed for 3 weeks. And of course, the city hasn't opened up yet. And so the employer said, well, we're just going to lay everybody off so you can get unemployment. So that's why we have to have everybody back on the job with proven hours before we can use that income to qualify.
Yeah. So for right now, employment is the biggest issue and the biggest concern, I think, with regard to getting into a loan system, getting into a lender system and staying through it throughout the process. That's on the seller side. I know that's a thing that I check 3 or 4 times during the process, is to make sure that people are still working, they're still on the job, so that there's not going to be a surprise at closing for anybody. So
right. And one of the things now we have to do is we have to constantly get updated income and asset documentation. So, a pay stub that was 2 months old that used to work 6 months ago does not work now. So everything has to be super, super current, which helps alleviate the problem of, is the person still working?
Yeah. Okay. So once you've gotten approved for a loan, once you know that you're comfortable out there, and I know James says, he looks at what you're comfortable paying monthly, which is great. Not everybody does. And I know that when you get your pre-approval letter, it's going to say some huge number that you're like, oh my God, I can't afford this, or I don't want to spend this much. What we're going to do is look for things far below that, because I love James, but when you've bought your house and you can't afford beer and pizza occasionally with your friends, it's not James who said you could afford it that you're going to be mad at. It's me, because I sold it to you. So I'm always really careful to make sure that we stay in a good place. And that's one of the reasons I recommend the lenders that I do, is because when we're going out and doing this fun part, the home searching, if we find something we like, I can email them immediately and say, hey, we found this house. Can you tell us what the monthly payment and cash to close is going to look at? And James's response time is immediate. I mean, within an hour, we know, here's how much that house is going to cost us every month, and here's how much cash we're going to need to bring to close. And we've got it all right there before we write the offer. And, that's so much easier. I've got a question that says, if we're looking to buy later this year, early 2021, is it too early to meet with a lender? And the answer is, it's never too late to meet with a lender. Never too late. Always go ahead and get started. I mean, start the process sooner rather than later.
And the reason for that is so that you're educated going forward, which is really important. And then if we have to make any changes, if you have to do anything to change your credit, if we have to pay balances down to get you in a better financial situation, we have time to do that between now and when you start the process. So I would love to have people come to me 3 months before they start buying versus after their offer is accepted. Now they're like, oh, I didn't get pre-approved, but here's all my information. It happens once in a while, believe it or not, it happens.
I know.
I don't know how, but it does.
Yep. Because there are agents out there who will take you out to show houses without you being pre-approved, and I will give you like a day, and then you have to be pre-approved. So, so the home searching part, which is what people think of as the fun part, and you get to go and look at houses. COVID has made some changes to that. We do have it's much easier to get into vacant homes than homes that people are still living in. I can provide gloves and wipes, but not masks, but you do need to have all of those when you go in. Assume that people are going to be watching you, because homeowners now, home sellers now are turning those cameras on and watching. And so be careful not to touch anything. And I'll go over this as we're showing things. But you want to be careful in other people's homes, not to be handsy. And it's surprising to me how many agents don't tell their clients that they need to do that. So I just am very clear about it up front. I've got wipes, I've got gloves. We'll go in and take a look. I'll touch everything. You can just look and it'll be fun. And there's a lot of new 3D video happening too, which is very fun, because now you can go ahead and find something, and I'll be able to send you quite often a 3D walkthrough of the property before we ever go and see it, so you can kind of see what it looks like. And those can be incredibly detailed, and you can really get a good idea of what the property looks like, much better than pictures. Pictures have always given us, I know pictures can be super misleading. It's hard to mess up a walkthrough, a 3D walkthrough, because you get to see all the blemishes, and the camera is literally right there, and it's not made to look pretty, it's made to look real, which is great. Those are very helpful. I will set you up on a home search too, so that you can use Zillow and Redfin, and HomeSnap is one that I really like because it tells me what you've looked at, which is great. I'll set you up on a home search that we'll do together, probably via Zoom, as long as we're still in this not being able to meet in person world. And you can kind of see the screenshot of what I'll share the screen of what I'm doing and everything that you need to see about what you're looking for. And you can see what my search parameters are, and then you can also do your own searches too. And then we'll go out and look for places on your schedule. Real estate is not a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 thing. I will absolutely be available in the evenings and on the weekends to take you out. The exciting part is writing an offer, and it can be a challenge. It's a lot of legal pages, but my job through this whole thing is to make this process be to smooth out the roller coaster, so that it's not a lot of really highs and a lot of really lows, but to make it a slightly bumpy thing. So writing an offer can be overwhelming for people. I actually really enjoy negotiation, and I'm good at it. So I'm going to be doing the best that I can to get you the best deal possible, so that we're getting as much as possible of what you want out of a home. And that's, I think, a really good, it's really important to know that you're not going to get 100% most of the time, but I'm going to get you as close as possible. And it's so weird not to be able to get questions from people and see faces. So I apologize that I'm going to ramble a little bit when I can't see faces. The next part of this is what happens when they say yes. Once we've written that offer and somebody says yes. So the other part of the cash that you need to have up front is your earnest money. This is the cash that you give to the seller to say, yes, I'm serious about buying your house. It should hurt a little bit to give it up, and that's kind of the point of it. This is the seller's parting gift. If you say you back out at the last minute, they get it. This is their thanks for taking your house off the market. We're real sorry we changed our minds. Actually, I've got a whole slide about the market change, and I will absolutely go over that with everybody in just a little bit, because she wanted to know about how COVID's changed the market and if we want to wait. So let me get through this, but the very last part of this is a whole discussion about Portland's market. So you want to have earnest money available. It's usually about 1% of the sales price. So on a $350,000 house would be $3,500. You get that back if you back out due to inspection problems or financing problems. If your financing fails because you lose your job or something, then you get your earnest money back. If you go through the house and you pay for inspections and discover something awful has happened, you get your earnest money back. If you go through the process and just change your mind, then you don't get your earnest money back. So it's, if the seller backs out, you do get your earnest money back, Leanne, yes. That doesn't happen very often though.
I just had it happen in Washington 2 days before closing.
Oh,
Seller backed
no.
out. Yeah.
The seller backed out?
Seller did. And the
Yeah.
buyer didn't think that could happen. And I go, in Washington, that's totally legal. It's written into the contract.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's unbelievable.
So yes, you do get your earnest money back. And there are consequences to that. Just like there are consequences to backing out on the buyer's side, you can be sued for specific performance. So you could think about these things really carefully before you back out of something at the last minute. So usually people back out easily at the, you can back out easily during your 10-day inspection period. And we have the first 10 days after mutual acceptance to do that. And it's 10, on the Washington side, it's 10 calendar days. On the Oregon side, it's 10 business days. So we have to keep track of what you're doing. But I have very good systems in place to not miss those dates. Pretty important. There was the inspection process is pretty simple, but can be terrifying. So you always need to get a general inspection. That's about between $500 and $600. The sewer scope, that's $150, and a radon test, that's $150, and a tank locate, which can be about $100. So those 4 things I always recommend. After that, it's up to you. You can do heavy duty mold testing, but it gets very expensive very quickly because air testing for mold is $300 per location, and they have to do an outside the house test and then 2 or 3 air tests inside the house to check it. So again, you're looking at $1,000 real fast for that kind of testing, but it's doable. If you want to test for lead in the water, there are ways to do that. There's all kinds of stuff that can be tested for, but I do those 4 to start because radon and sewer are looking at the things that we can't visibly see. Same with the tank locate. And then the general inspector is going to go through and give us a 50-page list of all of these things that are problematic in the house, right? Their job is to tell you everything that's wrong. And then our job, yours and mine together, is to look at it and say, okay, these are the things that we really want taken care of before we move in. And most of those things that are in those 50 pages are just a honey-do list of, the toilet seat is loose and you probably should fix that. I mean, it's, the wax seal on the toilet's loose, you pick that up and put a new silicone seal down. As long as the floor underneath it isn't wet, it's not become a safety issue. If the floor underneath it is wet, then it becomes a thing where now it's a safety issue potentially, and we want to have the seller take a look at that. So there are ways to get these things all taken care of. The big issues, what we are looking at are your systemic stuff, your envelope of the house, so siding, roofing, and foundation, and then the systems inside, heating, cooling, although, Portland didn't used to be an air-conditioned city, it's more so now. Your electrical system, your plumbing system, those are the things that we're looking at to make sure they get fixed and to do it in a way that keeps money in your pocket and has the seller handle those things. And that's another negotiating point. And so that's where, again, I am more than happy to do the negotiating and I'm good at it. So, and I'm never afraid to ask for more. So once we're done with the inspection period, then we get down to what I call the quiet time, because we're waiting for the appraisal, which is the lenders doing their job, sending out somebody to say, yes, this property is worth what the lender is giving you for it. Appraisers work for the lender, not for you. And so what you're often going to find is that, say we offered $325 on this property, and we know that we were coming in low and they accepted it. The appraiser is not going to say, oh, this house is really worth $375 because those are the comps around it. They're going to say, yes, it's worth the $325 that you've made the offer on. Every now and then you get lucky and somebody gives you a little bit of credit at the top, and that's always wonderful. It's nice to walk into your property, having made a really good deal, but I have to caution people, don't expect the appraisal to come back higher than what the loan is.
Right. And the appraiser has a copy of the purchase contract, so they know the number they're trying to hit.
Yeah. After the appraisal, now we're just in this quiet time where underwriting and the lenders are doing their jobs and doing their thing. Signing is not the same as closing in Oregon. So about a week before what we set as our close date, you're going to get what's called a CD from James or from the lender, and they're going to say, here's how much money we're giving you. Here's all of the details of this to make you aware of the fact that you're getting a loan, and you've got 3 days. You've got that to sign, and then we can close 3 days after you've signed that. So you get that little waiting period afterwards. So, James, what happens if they change their mind during that waiting period of the CD? Has anyone ever
like backed out of the house?
Yeah.
I've never had that happen. I had it happen yesterday where the borrower decided that she wanted to pay her taxes and insurance on her own versus roll it into her payment every month.
Mm-hmm.
And that was discovered at the CD. All the other documentation we provided said, taxes and insurance will be part of your monthly payment. And she said, okay. And at the very end, she said, I don't want that. And that's exactly why that disclosure is there, so that you have the last chance to look and say, okay, this is how much I'm borrowing. Here's my interest rate. Here's my payment. Here are my terms. If something doesn't look right, we can fix it really quick. Yep. So that's exactly what we did.
Yeah. So you've got that 3 days after you sign that CD to fix any problems, and then we can sign, and then it goes back to the lender. The lender calls the employers one more time, checks your credit one more time, and then we close. Then the documents go to the county, and that's what's considered closing. And that happens the same day that money goes in. Funding and closing usually happen the same time. So you don't, so we caution people very strongly, along with the job question that everybody's concerned about right now, we say, don't spend anything that's going to change your credit score between signing and closing, because you go out and buy something on credit during that time, then you've changed your credit score, and that can adversely affect getting to that close. So.
Right, and most lenders have credit monitoring once you apply for a loan. So if you use the account you already have open, it's not an issue typically. But if you apply for a new card, like you go to Home Depot and they have 12 months no payment on a washer and dryer, and you're like, sweet, I need a washer and a dryer. So you apply for a new credit card, then we're going to find out about it. And then underwriting is going to go, wait a minute, now we need to know what the payment is on this, because we have to add that in to make sure you can afford it still. So I typically tell my people, don't apply for anything, don't change your job during the process. If anything gets worse in your financial situation, let me know before you do it. So if you need to go buy a car in the middle of this process, which I've had lots of people do, talk to me before you go do it, because it's easier to be proactive than reactive.
And I've had some strange things happen in that in between time. So with the house of my own, the seller, granted it was the seller and not the buyer, but the seller declared bankruptcy 2 weeks before close and didn't tell anybody. And we didn't find out about it until we actually went to, until it actually got to that final 2 weeks or that final 2 days. And the title company said, did you know? And everybody was like, no, we had no idea. So my agent at the time had to call had to get in touch with the bankruptcy court and say, okay, we have an offer on this house and it's closing. Will you accept it? Because, of course, the seller no longer could be the one to say yes or no to the house. Right. So that's the sort of thing that, last minute things that get weird. So we will watch all this for you. If something like that happened, I wouldn't even tell you until it was done, until I had fixed the problem. So, which is what my realtor did for me. So, And then you get your keys. Once we've gotten that notice of recording from the county, you'll get your keys. Was I gonna, give me just a second. Possession. So you'll get your keys at close. However, possession is often written to extend to the sellers in this market. Portland's market has been notoriously low in inventory for honestly three or 4 years now. And so in order for people to sell their houses, they need to buy another house. And so there's usually an overlap of time. It's really, really common, and it makes your offer look really good if you give the sellers a week of rent back at no cost. So don't be surprised if that's the thing that we talk about in negotiation, is that, you know, when you're competing against 5 other offers, if you offer rent back, it can make your offer much stronger comparatively. So it's a thing to keep in mind. And then possession changes to a week down the road, or a week or 2 down the road, however you want to work it out. Rent back means, Leanne wants to know what rent back means. So rent back means that if the sellers that we're going to close, we're going to just use May 30th as the date. If we close on May 30th, then you are now the owner of the house, but the sellers get to live there for another week so that they have time to get closed on the house that they're buying and get their stuff all packed and moved. And then your possession date is going to be June 5th, for example. So that's called rent back, and it means we're giving the space back to, giving the house back, or letting the owners stay in the house for that period of time. You can charge them rent, but I like to offer it for free for the first 5 days. And then after that, charge a daily rate that is equal to 1/30th of your monthly payment of your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So, James, real quick before I go on to the C19 effects, Autumn wanted to know, she says, I might have missed it because I signed in late, but did we discuss credit requirements? And that is something I don't remember that we went over, was actual credit score requirements.
That actually ties into COVID-19, believe it or not. Yeah. So it used to be very simple. We had a very easy grid that was typically 620 is the minimum credit score. But now with COVID, every lender has what's called an overlay, and it's an extra guideline that they place on top of the standard guidelines. So they may say, hey, we're not taking anyone without below a 660 or a 680, or we're going to require that you have to put so much down on a home. So there are some different requirements, and believe it or not, that's changing on like an every other day basis, because this COVID thing hit hard.
The first week.
Right. It was crazy in early March. It was insane. But that's a good question. So 620, 660 is probably the safest bet. You can go below 660, but it's going to cost more because lower credit score means to a lender increased risk.
Yeah.
So how can people check their credit scores if they're just casually thinking about whether they might meet that requirement?
So that's a good question. So a lot of places, credit card companies, Credit Karma, have scores online, but we pull what's called a tri-merge, and it's all 3 credit bureaus in one report. And we drop the low score and we drop the high score. And we use whatever the middle score is for qualifying. And more often than not, like if someone goes on Credit Karma and pulls, has a credit score, we're going to pull a credit report and it's going to be scored different. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. So it's hard, even if you pay for your score through Equifax or Experian, because we pull a mortgage report, it pulls a little bit different information and scores things different.
So the answer to the question is call a lender, sit down and do it. Having a lender pull your credit score for a mortgage is not going to cause a big bump in your score, right, James?
Right. That is correct. Yeah.
So it's a soft hit, not a hard hit, right?
It's a hard hit. So it shows up on your report as a hard inquiry because it's scored. But usually it only affects your points, maybe 2 or 3 points.
Okay.
And it needs to be done. I mean, I would rather do it sooner versus later because the interest rate that you pay on the loan is based on your credit score, and it's typically in 20-point buckets. So 700 to 719 is one interest rate, 720 to 739 is another interest rate, 740 to 759 is another interest rate. And so if you're at 718, we pull your score and you're at 718, we have ways to look to see what we can do to get you above 720 or 740, so that when you're ready to buy, whether it be 2 weeks down the road or 3 months down the road, your score is higher so that your terms are better.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, is that even if you think that you're in the mid 600s, get in touch with a lender who can help you get past that. Because a good lender, like I talked about in the first one, a good lender is going to be able to look at your credit score, look at what's going on and say, here's what you need to do. Pay this off, save this much, and then in 6 months, come back and we'll talk about where you are, because you can really set up that kind of a plan. And 6 months seems like it's going to be forever, but we all know right now, 2 months isn't forever. 2 months went by real fast. So 6 months is going to go by real fast too. And a good lender will get you to that point.
And we have two reports we can pull. One is what score are we trying to hit? And the other is a what if scenario. So we look at everything you have on your credit report and what if you pay this balance down $500? What does that do to your score? And so there's different ways depending on what we're trying to do to accomplish the desired effect.
Yeah. So rule number one, step number one, talk to a good lender.
Right.
Okay. So COVID effects. It has affected the numbers considerably. Let me go ahead and show those here. So I don't know if you can see how well you can see this, but what we're looking at is how many new listings, pending sales, and closed sales that we had. And you can see all these numbers down here have dropped a lot. So the only one that hasn't is closed sales, and it was 2.9% of, it was an increase of 2.9% over last year's closed sales. And that's because these numbers were for April, and people who closed in April had already gotten in contract usually in February, March. So it was at the beginning of all of this nonsense. So those deals still closed. It's less than the previous months because there were some people who were in contract and ended up having to drop because they've lost their jobs, because they were furloughed, and they were no longer able to close. And that happened to a lot of people, and it's definitely a thing that has affected those numbers. Portland's inventory is, again, notoriously low. It's been low for years and years. I don't think I would wait to search because of COVID, as long as you're in a position of employment where you feel comfortable with not being furloughed. That's the number one thing, is knowing that you're not going to get through this process and spend $2,000 or $3,000 on inspections and appraisals and then not be able to get to the end. So
and that's one of my first questions I ask is, how safe is your job?
Yeah.
What do you do for a living? How long have you been there? And a lot of it depends on the industry that the people are into.
Yeah.
And how secure is your employment? Because If you're like, I don't know, then we might want to wait a little bit.
Yeah. So, and I have no problem talking to people's lenders about this, and I do it all the time on the selling side. Call the lenders and be like, have you talked to their employer? Have you checked? Do they definitely, are they planning anything? Who are they working for? And unfortunately, being in the medical field is no longer the guarantee that it was 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago, where I'd have been more comfortable. But that's going to be a you question. How comfortable do you feel? Waiting to search? I absolutely would not. Interest rates are ridiculously low. James, what were they today? 3?
We have lenders under 3% right now.
Yeah. So money is ridiculously cheap. Keep in mind that I bought my first house at 10% interest. So it's not a bad time to look. You will probably be in multiple offer situations, still good properties in good conditions. Yeah, interest rates are ridiculously low. It's really, really good. Yeah, and if you're already a homeowner and you can refinance, call James, because this is a good time to do that if you haven't done forbearance. The looking, it's going to be the same situation that we were in before the virus, where you're going to be in a multiple offer situation quite often. If it's a great house and a great property at a great price, then there will be multiple offers for it. So we have to look at how we can put ourselves up there. You're going to have a little less competition, probably, than we did before, just because not everybody can make that jump because they've been laid off. But you're still going to have competition. It's still happening. Let's see. Wait to search. Pricing is the other thing that people are worried about. Well, the question up to this point had always been, are we in a bubble that's going to burst like 2008? Now it's, are we going to be in a recession? Well, yeah, we're already in a recession. That's why I told Catherine, don't tell people I'm giving you an optimistic view of the market. I'm going to give you a realistic view of the market. Are we in a recession? Yes. The difference is, if you look historically at the recessions that we've been in this country, housing is not always as affected as it was in 2008. We look at the 2008 market and the drop that it had, and that drop was there because the housing market was the cause of that recession, primarily. If you look at like the 80s, the recession in the 80s, housing still had, prices still stayed relatively stable. You'll see, you can see on the thing here, average sales prices are still going up a little bit. Median dropped a little bit from the previous month, but not much. The prices before the virus, I told people, the market does this. This is just the normal how things go. And Portland's market, we're probably right about here. So if you're planning to stay in your home for 5 years or more, I think you're just fine. You can go ahead and buy now. And if you sold it 5 years from now for the exact same thing that you sold it for, including your costs and stuff, you will have essentially lived there rent-free for 5 years. And you get to move on to the next thing. So in a place that you can paint any color you want and where you can knock holes in the wall. It's like any investment, real estate is a risk, but it's a risk you get to live in, and one that I think is worth it. Absolutely. So would I buy now? Absolutely. Even though our prices in Portland are high because of our low inventory, and I don't see that changing a lot anytime soon. Even with the virus, that inventory is not popping up. People aren't selling their houses or putting their houses on the market immediately. So that takes us kind of to the end of what I had planned and the kind of the discussion of the process. So if you have more questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And I can hang out for however long we need to.
I have a couple of questions while people are thinking of their own and typing them in, just based on what was presented. My first one is for James. When I refinanced my house just recently, I also took out some cash to do some work. Is that something that first-time home buyers are normally approved? It was not my first time buying a home, and I don't know if I was a first-time home buyer, if the bank would have let me do that.
So you can do that when you refinance, but really not when you purchase.
Okay.
So the only time you can do that when you purchase is if you take out a rehabilitation loan where you build in the cost of some upgrades into the new loan. But just to take some cash out, you can't do that. Believe it or not, you could do that when I first started in 2006. You could do that on a purchase. Like you could borrow up to 125% of the value of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But that's probably why 2008 happened, because 2006 happened. So luckily these days, we're writing all low fixed rate mortgages without any funky features, which is a lot safer for the consumer.
So a couple of questions. One is about Portland Housing Center, and they do offer classes and programs that can help you get to additional grants and matching programs. I am not a Portland Housing Center agent. They opened themselves up once a year to new agents. And they did not open themselves up this year, which does not surprise me in the slightest. And last year when it opened up, I had a family emergency and had everything filled out and then forgot to send it in. So I had every intention of being a Portland Housing Center agent at some point down the road, but I am not currently. However, I do highly recommend their classes. You can do their classes and then come work with me and James. There's no reason not to do that. So.
And I guess I talked to someone yesterday and they're doing that class online. Obviously, they're doing it online now.
Which is great.
But I took mine when I bought my first house, and it was 8 hours on a Saturday, and it was a lot of info crammed into 8 hours. But it was a lot of good information. And it's there to help start the dialogue, to put the questions in, so that when you talk to the professionals, you have a roadmap of where to go.
Yep. And then Sprout asks, how long is unreasonable to work with a realtor? What if it takes a long time to find something that works? I'm okay with that. When I first got my license, I worked for a company and they said that, I had one guy who was in the office, big white guy. And he was like, well, if you take them out and you show them 5 places and they don't choose something in the first 5 houses, then they're clearly not serious. And I was like, that's a load of crap. People take the time that they take. When I found my last place, I took, I think, 1.5 years to find it, because I was looking for a place that 3 people had to agree on. I don't mind. One of my longest clients took about 1 year because they were looking in a very specific school district for their kids. So
my record was 2 years. Yeah, my record was 2 years.
Was it?
And they must have written 100 offers, but they were always going in low at the height of the market. And finally, one of them took, and they're loving it. But yeah. So we're not gonna. Neither of us are gonna say it's taking too long. I will not be that problem. It's right. Okay. It takes as long as it takes. This is a long-term commitment, and
There are definitely things that are weird about housing in general. It's very strange to me that we expect people to, make the largest purchase they'll ever make in their lives based on a 20-minute visit, honestly. So I will take you back to see the house as many times as we can get in. I will take as much time as we need to get you into the place that you like. So.
And I bought the house that I'm in now, I bought it the first house I looked at. I just out casually looking one weekend, not even planning to buy.
Yeah.
Stumbled across the house and bought it. So you just never know. And that's been 9 years ago.
Yep. And I have clients who bought the first house that they looked at, and were absolutely in love with it. And I have clients who have seen 50 and still haven't found one that they love yet. And that's okay. Autumn asked, does it typically cost anything to meet with a lender initially when you're starting the process? And I think the answer is no.
The answer is no. There are some lenders in Portland that charge an application fee. Usually it's about $500. And if you don't complete the process, you lose the $500. And if you do complete the process with them, then they credit that $500 towards your costs at the end. To us, that's very poor business.
Yeah.
We all were first-time home buyers. We all had lots of questions. I'm happy to have a conversation with you for 10 minutes or an hour or over a weekend, whatever is convenient for you. And if you choose to move forward, great. And if you don't, that's okay too. I'd rather give you the information and have you be educated and know going forward and be empowered. So no, we don't charge. We don't charge for credit reports. If we pull someone's credit, we don't charge an application fee. To us, that's just not the way to run business.
So we're having a conversation in the chat at the same time about Smush said that, wow, if you sell your house 5 years from now for the same price, you've essentially lived there 5 years rent free. I never thought about it like that. Catherine says, yes, but less the cost of interest. Sorry for my enthusiasm. I love real estate. And I said, but with the tax credit. So it does balance out.
That's so true. And I wish that someone had explained that to me when I was afraid of buying my first home. Now that I've been through 4 purchases, I'm just really comfortable with the way the numbers play out, but it takes some hand-holding to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, it really does. And you don't think about it, because you've never filled out a tax form where you get all those credits before. Mm-hmm. So, and we work really hard to make sure that stays something that's available for everybody. NAR, of all the things that they do, that's one that I actually really approve of, the National Association of Realtors. I like that they work real hard to make sure that credit stays there for everybody. And then we had a request to share contact info in the chat. So I am doing that right now for me. Now, James, I'm going to do it for you too.
Okay, I'm going to ask a big roller derby question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just comes to mind based on my own experience and my knowledge of our audience here. What about if you wanted to run an elaborate scam? Here's how you would do it. You would get married with a friend, buy a home, live there peacefully because maybe you're already housemates, but the important part is you get married, because I know from getting divorced that all the profit that I made on my home was not taxed the same.
Mm-hmm.
So then you would get divorced when you wanted to sell the house, right?
Yeah.
You following me here? So then your capital gains kind of tax when you sell isn't applicable during a divorce. What do you think, James? Should we do it?
Well, I don't often give legal or tax advice. I'm not supposed to do that. But I believe that there's a capital gains exemption of $250,000 for individual and $500,000 for a couple. So if you sell your primary home and you profit less than $250,000, you don't pay capital gains tax on it anyway. And so I don't know if I would get married just to avoid that, because the divorce may cost even more.
Those are expensive. It's true. Sprout has a better question.
Is it better to get married before buying a house?
To us, it doesn't matter.
From a tax standpoint, I don't know because I'm not a tax specialist.
So what I would say off the record is, most people take their standard deduction, which is $12,000. I think it's $12,000. This now the tax laws have changed, and then when you're married, it goes to $24,000. So if you are a single person and you buy a house, typically the interest that you pay plus the other things you can write off means you go above the standard deduction, and it's cost benefit for you to buy a house because all the write-offs you could take as a single person, sometimes as a married person, now it's up to $24,000, and that's not the case. So I don't know if I think from a tax standpoint, a single person buying a house is actually better tax-wise, but I would check with a tax professional to confirm that.
Yeah.
And we have a call with a tax professional coming up on our Zoom.
That's a good question.
Good,
yeah,
I will join that call.
Question for her, because I'm always curious about how head of household write-offs play into tax equations in terms of doing something big like purchasing real estate or investing.
I would absolutely will go ahead and attend that, because my answer is going to be call Amanda at Math LLC because I do not know the answer to tax questions.
Right.
We also had a great financial seminar for anyone that missed it, and I did touch on the housing market at the end. So that was with Charlene Charisma, another roller derby sponsor that is on our YouTube channel. So I recommend that to anyone who is interested in learning more about the ins and outs of the financial market right now.
Cool, I will check that one out. All right. For VA loans, does one need to go to a specific lender? And if only one person in the couple was in the military, would that matter?
You don't have to go to one specific lender. For us, we're a broker, so we're not tied to one particular lender, but VA works a little bit different, and we have to sign up with each lender that we work with to do VA loans. So it works a little bit different. Only the veteran needs to be on the loan, but the people need to be married. So it can't be a veteran and a fiance. So it'd have to be the veteran by themselves on the loan if they're not married.
But that's on the loan, not in the house, right? Because they
on the
can still
title, correct.
They can still,
yes.
So the veteran would have to be the one on the loan. But
correct.
If they were unmarried, the veteran would have to be on the loan, but the unmarried partner could take title, and that would be
correct.
Okay.
Because the loan is just the ability to pay the mortgage back. The title is the ownership of the house. So whoever's on the loan has to be on the title, but people can be on the title but not on the loan.
Yeah, exactly. So, and people don't know that they can do that. You don't have to be on the loan in order to own the house. As long as the person who is taking the loan says, yes, we're going to do this together. So. And
that's a good question.
And a good lender can help you figure out who can and who can't do who can and who shouldn't be on the loan. Yeah, Catherine, I do. She says, so one head of household plus one individual equals 31,050. It's like, yeah, this is where I need to talk to the tax person, because I'm like, but I know that when I did own my home with two other people, one of whom didn't work, and then I worked, and the third person worked. Our tax person at the time, who has since retired, unfortunately, our tax person at the time would he would run it so that I was taking all of it, and so that my third person was taking all of it, and then splitting it between the two of us to see how we got the most money back every year. So really good to have a good tax person.
It really is, especially when you're in a relationship or do any sort of gig work or own your own business. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and Smush, that talks to who takes the interest deduction or who claims the interest deduction. If you have a good tax person, they will work it out for you. So they'll check both people's income or all the people's income, because you can definitely buy a house with 4 or 5 other people. And they'll check it against who's got the most income and how to get the best deal for it. And then James Ashley has a lending question that says, how does joint loan application affect rates and qualifications? So that goes to the 3 or 4 people. If you're having more than one person, how do you balance or does that change the qualifications?
So we just pool the income and the debt and the assets of everybody on the loan. And we use the lowest credit score of everybody on the loan. So like I said before, we pull a tri-merge report, which is all 3 credit bureaus in one report, drop the high score, drop the low score, and we use the middle score. And then we use the lowest middle score for everybody on the loan in order to price everything out. And so again, that's where sometimes if we have someone that has really great credit and really high income and their co-borrower has really low credit and not a lot of income, sometimes that's not beneficial to put the person with the lower credit score on the loan. And so I'll suggest that and say, you can jump on title to be on as owner, but if you go on the loan, we're taking into the account your credit score and your pricing is going to be affected. And so we run it both ways, because sometimes people want to go on the loan so they can build a credit history, but that's kind of an expensive way to do it. And so I usually will recommend in that situation,
card instead.
right? Or plan and let's plan it out for 6 months and try to find a way to get this credit score higher before jumping on the loan.
Yeah. James, that's interesting. That brings up a point for me, is that if someone's on a loan with you, you need to refinance in order to put that loan now into one person's name. You have to have a fresh loan if you're taking
Correct.
someone else off the loan. But if someone's on your title with you, do you have to do a complicated?
You have to do a refi to put them on the loan. Mm-hmm.
No, to take them off the title.
Just to take them off the title.
Take them off.
Putting someone on the title, but not putting them on the loan.
When I bought that house and I had the third person, when he then left, he did a quit claim deed. And I'm not sure if that's still what they're called, but at the time they were called a quit claim, and it's just a simple piece of paperwork that you file with the title company in the county.
Right.
You can, how you get that person to agree to do the quit claim is different. So it's a lot like a divorce situation where you're saying, I'll pay you off this much to walk away and file this quit claim so that you're
right. But if the person is on the loan and they're on the title and they quit claim off the title, they're still obligated on the loan.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of times the person that stays in the house needs to refinance the loan to get the person that's departing off the responsibility, because normally people don't want to be obligated to pay the mortgage back but not have ownership of the house. Which
is why you end up sometimes with people who end up having to sell the house when they split, because the person who's staying or who wanted to stay can't afford to refinance on their own, or can't get qualified to refinance on their own. So, and that's why sometimes people agree to stay on the mortgage. They'll get themselves off the deed but stay on the mortgage just long enough for the person who's staying with the house to get their credit up so that they can qualify on their own too. There are ways to handle all of this stuff. So good.
Does anybody have any more questions for our experts here?
It's a lot of really good questions, you guys. Thank you so much.
I think we're about ready to wrap. And I think that people have your contact information for both of you. They know to start with James. and then you get set up with Deb.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of a free just check in on run some numbers for me, what can I do.
Right.
I'm always curious about what's going on with real estate in town, so I really enjoyed this talk and this presentation and all the help you may offer our people.
Yeah,
Yes,
anytime
thank you so
anybody just
much.
wants to talk about real estate in the market and stuff, I am more than happy to do that. I love real estate. I love talking about it. More than happy to just sit down and have coffee and go over stuff with people. Okay?
Awesome. And hopefully we'll just all meet you up at a future roller derby bout.
Right. Life goes back up.
Yeah. Until then, virtual coffee will have to do. So
that sounds good. All right. Have a great night, everybody.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Right.